we actually find a use for one of our denies. For today's video, we're going to be piloting a deck that I have really enjoyed in the past, wanted to revisit for some time, and then I was given an excuse to do so. This is Jarvan, aka J4, paired with Shen. This is a mid-range deck. It takes advantage of Barrier and Challenger. We are using one of the new cards from the most recent expansion, the Swiftwing Flight. But a couple of days ago on the ladder, I ran into Jito playing a version of this list, and they were running the recently buffed via the balance patch Greenglade Lookout, and I really liked that inclusion for a number of reasons, and I said, okay, I want to take a shot at building a version that runs it. Now, the downside is, like most lists that I end up playing or sharing, this is the kind of deck that is potentially really versatile, but it also means that you can't fit everything you want to fit into the deck. So there is some room to play around with the numbers. There are some cards that I'm just choosing not to include, right or wrong, and I'll talk about those as we go. Starting right out of the gate, actually, I guess I should start scrolling down because I am not running Greenglade Caretaker at the moment. This could be a mistake. It scales really well. It's good value for a 1-drop in a list like this, but I wanted to maximize my units with Challenger because I wanted to run Flight as well. So this is, I think right now, just a bit of a preference / testing call. But just keep in mind that if you want to run Caretaker, you can, and it might even be correct. But I'm running Fleet Feather Tracker along with Bright Steel Protector. This is the old scary 1-2 start for Demacia because they likely eat a unit. You go up in terms of board presence. You know the drill at this point. It's been there since the dawn of time as far as Runeterra is concerned. But we also have Greenglade Lookout. So this was recently buffed to a 2-2. But it has on strike reduce the cost of the most expensive unit in your hand by 1, and this is potentially, anyway, very, very fun, very, very cheeky in this list because we are a mid-range list. There's a lot of great units that are even better with discounts. For example, we're rocking 2 copies of Bright Steel Formation on the top end, so if you play a round 2 Lookout, this could be coming down on 8, 7, maybe even 6, but anytime you can play it early, that gives you the opportunity to catch your opponent by surprise as well. And a big powerful play like a Bright Steel as a surprise as well is just icing on the cake. Also, I think maybe not talked about enough is the idea that besides just playing units early, whenever you cost reduce a unit, it also increases the other things you can do in that turn. So being able to play Bright Steel and then have mana left over for other units, have mana left over for more spells, combat tricks, that's also kind of really important. So I really like the Lookout. Jarvan is the other one. So I was talking about catching your opponents by surprise. If you don't have that Bright Steel in your hand, but you do have a Jarvan, and you get to drop a Jarvan on round 5, or heaven forbid, like a round 4 Jarvan is brutal. So I really love the addition of Lookout. I also love that it is strike. So cards like Single Combat, cards like Concerted Strike, they're very relevant. We're obviously rocking barriers, so protecting it is also on the menu. It's not just going to be a one and done, but the buff was very relevant because going from 1 health to 2 means it now survives what I call incidental damage. There's a number of effects in the game where your units just kind of accidentally take 1, whether it's Withering Wail or the newly, rebuffed or unnerfed, however you want to word it, Make It Rain, things like that. You didn't want to play Lookout and have it be eaten by a Vile Feast, for example. That was always a problem. And so going from 1 health to 2 is actually a pretty big deal, and I like it. We're going to move on now, though. Still got quite a bit to cover, but we're going to go kind of quickly because this is a standard list. At this point, unless you're brand new to the game, you should be familiar with many of the other inclusions. Sharp Sight is arguably the best, straight buffing combat trick in Demacia, maybe even the game. +2/+2 is very relevant. Blocking elusive units, very relevant. Single Combat is the bread and butter of Demacia as well. Then as we go up, this is where things get a little tricky. In the past, I would have ran something like 3 copies of Protege just so that you could have this, if you're not basically playing something on 2, a lot of times you can pass on 2 to bank some spell mana, maybe 4 something like single combat or sharp sight, and play Protege on 3. However, I've cut this down to 1 because I wanted to put in Swiftwing Flight, and I'll talk about the benefits of that in a minute. So that's why this is a 1 of, but again, I love this card. If you want to try to jam in more, feel free. River Shaper. This is still a 3 of because Demacia is kind of struggling with card draw traditionally. This is our most consistent form of card draw in the deck, and that's very relevant. So this is also a unit you usually want to protect or try to get 2 or 3 triggers out of. Just like the Lookout, it's on strike, so single combat, concerted strike, all those tricks work here as well. Deny, this is a great meta for Deny right now, so I like 2 copies there. Aegis is great because it's barrier, so obviously that helps both Shen and Jarvan, and Rally is good. Shen, one of the champions. Spirit's Refuge. So this could be a number of different cards. I would be fine with this just being like Radiant, for example. There's another card I'd love to include, but we're not. However, with the presence of like Pirate Aggro and some of these other aggressive lists, I really like the idea of having just a surprise lifesteal play. And then also because it also is a barrier card, if you've got a leveled up Shen, this turns into a surprise buff for potentially getting lethal. And that's really important. Any of these times where you can play a barrier as a surprise, it will, even if it's on a unit that already has barrier, because you can reapply barrier, it will give that buff if your Shen is level 2. And so I just really think Spirit's Refuge is in a good spot right now for this list. But again, this could potentially be considered a flex spot. Swiftwing Flight. So I wanted to play this because we are running a number of units with Challenger. We've already covered the low end ones, but even further up, we still have Screeching Dragon. So the attack and buffing the other units is nice, but going even a step further, going above and beyond in that regard, is that this creates another unit in hand when you play it. And as I said before with River Shaper, Demacia is usually lacking when it comes to card draw. And so while this isn't true card draw, it's still kind of resource extension, and you need that in a list like this. So I'm a fan. So far in my limited testing, I really like this card. 2 concerted strikes just as, you know, additional backup plans to your single combats. Screeching Dragon is still one of the better units in Demacia, especially at a 5 cost. It grows, it's got Challenger, it's got a high health total, so we like it. Jarvan, the other reason this is relevant, and honestly all these Challenger units are relevant, is because of Jarvan, right? So Jarvan's our other champion, but we need to be challenging blockers to set up value trades, not just to go ahead on board, but that's also the easiest way to level up Jarvan. And then once Jarvan's leveled up and you start getting free cataclysms, if you can keep Jarvan alive, you can just dominate a board. So they will have to answer Jarvan almost immediately in order to stop that. And then the top end is Bright Steel, because that card is just nutty with a leveled Shen, but it's just nutty in general. And maybe we get to play it for cheaper. So that's the list. As always, deck code will be in the video description. Link to Mobalytics will be in the video description. And with that out of the way, we're going to jump into some games and see how the deck does. Well. This could be problematic. This is likely the Ruben list, which has the potential to be problematic simply because of the presence of Spell Shield. I think these go back. I don't think Deny gives us a lot of value in this matchup, because traditionally I think here we would actually just be using it to protect our own other spells. Like we spell, they deny, we deny. I love the 1-drop. I think keeping the potential lifesteal is great. And while I want Jarvan on curve, well, we're getting a Jarvan one way or the other. I don't think keeping Jarvan in the opener is necessarily correct. So the dilemma here is, do you want to just take the open attack for 2? Could also just pass.
Quick hands make quick work. You're covered.
I think this is fine. the potential sacrifice of 2 damage versus getting rid of a unit, I felt outweighed it.
Without a sound.
All right, so with 2 mana here, Twin Disciplines is what would save the Zed. So we're gonna force them to use it. And they don't have it. Okay, so you want to do it there before they attack so that you don't have to deal with the other unit as well. And so here, I think we're fine with developing Shen.
One balance.
Now they could pass here if they really wanted to. Instead, they are going to make the Walking Sands, which I do find interesting, but we can do this at least. So it saves them a couple of damage.
Love it when they run.
They have the Hunter. Looking for a potential value trade there.
You're no match for me, Zed. You're right. I far surpassed you.
Now here we've got 2 combat tricks and exactly 6 mana, so I think this is just a pass.
Run.
With them having 3 mana available, we actually should be able to save both of our units here.
Only the worthy survive. There is no dispute. My father's blade.
The question is whether or not we even want to risk the Shen. Like, we could try to bait out the Twin Disciplines they didn't have, and we still have the Sharp Sight. I think we're okay with it, because if we take the open attack next round, as long as Shen's alive, Jarvan should be chewing this up as a blocker. So I think this is fine. You could argue that just taking the 3 damage is acceptable. It's not like we're hurting for health here. But if I'm being honest, I'm kind of just trying to bait some options out. So they still could have a Twin Discipline. They didn't have it the last time though, so we're just going to continue trying to get it out of them. The Rockhopper is actually legitimately annoying. Just because it's going to chew up our Jarvan, but
Enforced equilibrium. With me.
I think this is still worth it because we get Shen leveled up, which is very relevant. And it also means as long as one of these survives, our Jarvan levels. So again, even if they turn around and they kill our Jarvan, both of our champions are now leveled up for the rest of the game. Getting a little low on resources, but our Swiftwing here will maybe give us a refill. And also, our opponent seems to be a little low as well. Now the double deny, not super useful here, but thankfully we're at the point now where Cataclysm can maybe do some work for us. And unfortunately, not much that we can do there. I actually think we're gonna take this Vanguard.
If it's made of sand,
It'll help us with dealing with the Rockhopper. Should probably get some value out of this now. The question is, in what capacity? Because both of these already have Challenger. And so maybe we don't. Maybe we just do this instead to let this eat the vulnerable. And we're gonna go with this over the Screeching here, just because it's 2 bodies, and if we're gonna be swinging with this, we also want the buff on as many units as possible. So just for example, if we do something like this, this is enough to at least threaten lethal because of the various barrier buffs and things like that, but they have an opportunity for their own answers here. So they have a Spirit's Refuge and a Palm. We actually find a use for one of our denies. So that should still be lethal because we're going to deal the damage before the lifesteal. And that is basically how the deck is supposed to work for the most part. Jumping into our second game, and this one is going to be, I think, a bit more of a challenge. Because it's very hard for us to race deep, I believe. This is also a bit interesting because there's a part of me that wants to keep this deny. There's a number of cards that I think shutting down with a deny could be really beneficial. Obviously, the one that comes to mind is Atrocity, but if they run like Withering Wail, most are for sure running like Bone Skewer. Those are all potential options, but I think we're going to throw it back because we want at least one more early game unit. Turn the tracker on, because you have to assume that they're going to have something early themselves, like the Dredger. And we can go ahead and block because otherwise we would just be challenging it anyway. Now, strong chance they play... Oh, I was gonna say maybe something like a Scarab here, but... They're just gonna lure. Great for them, not so great for us. This is really just gonna come down to how much pressure we can generate in the mid game to see if we can then create a window of opportunity to finish things off. But for now, we will Shen. Oh no. Oh no. This is not good at all for us. Yes, we're getting the damage in, but a double lure this early and our opponent is still above 10 health cannot bode well for us. Now they're still, you know, quite a ways away from deep, so maybe that works out in our favor. That is a Devourer. And so I think, as sad as it sounds, it's really important that we try to save this. It does get rid of a potential blocker, so it's not the end of the world. So there is a Skewer, which moves it to the top of the deck, which is bad. And it's a one-way strike, so even something like Sharp Sight is not enough to save it here. So I think we just have to let this go, unfortunately. So we're gonna go with this, and then we have a decision to make. Could make another tracker. We could go with the Vanguard to go wide, or we've got the Blinding Assault, which we could then play with our spell mana, and I think that's the way that I want to go here. strong chance this gets targeted by the Devourer that just went to the top of the deck. So you also have to consider that this is a likely requirement. And I think we want to go ahead and barrier this Shen as well. We don't want this to take damage in the attack itself, I don't think, because it makes other Devourers become problematic as well.
Protect and strike.
Because we are on a clock. We absolutely need to get some damage in. Because I got a feeling, even though they were a ways away from deep before, they're going to be hitting it here very soon. It's a shame we haven't gotten any of our cost reduction units yet. Playing this does level our Shen. So I want to get that, I think, out of the way while also protecting our challenger unit. They've played the Maokai, and so you're worried about something like the Sapling, for example. And so now I think we just pass until combat itself resolves. Yeah, they could very well have like another jettison. I know we've seen one and they've had one burned, but they could have something that makes them go deep mid-combat here, and so we also have to factor that into whatever our decisions are. We could save this with a sharp sight. Or we could just play the blinding assault. So the interesting thing here is that the sharp sight, we're gonna need all the help we can on getting the damage in, because we can't drop Bright Steel this next round, and we're gonna need all the help we can for getting the damage in to finish them off. Like, we might be able to clean up their board next round, but I think it's probably worth it to save as many units as we can here, and then hope that the Shen stand united is enough, because they are essentially deep here. Make no mistake about it. All right, so the important piece here is how we try to take advantage of Shen's stand united to maybe push damage. And or just clean up the board. But even with 3 cards in hand, they could still get a lot done. But we want to do it this way because I'm trying to actually get them to avoid this. So if you're wondering why this didn't pull a unit on purpose, just kind of trying to get them to avoid it. Because now we have the opportunity to take a shot at lethal with the stand united. Because if we move this over, it still grants it barrier even though it has barrier, which means an extra buff from the Shen. And so I think that even though that means Shen dies here, if they have an answer, I think going for the lethal is the correct play.
We walk between realms.
So we're gonna go ahead and do this, and again, it's going to apply the barriers and then the buffs. because with barrier and the attack, this is hopefully enough. But if they find, yep, that's not what we wanted them to draw, that is what we wanted them to burn. If they had found something like a Vile Feast and then they also had a Skewer, then we could have been in a rough spot. But sometimes you look at your hand and you say, you know, the game is tipping. The scales are going in the other direction. We're probably not going to win this if we don't take advantage of this opportunity. I felt like that was the case, but we got to win. So, you know, that's the list. Didn't get to do too much that was overly flashy there, unfortunately. I really wanted to showcase the lookout and the cost reduction shenanigans, but overall, oh, that's funny. Overall, I was happy with how it performed, but also I just had a notification pop up. Even though I'm recording for YouTube right now, I'm doing it through OBS, and I did not turn off my like live streaming notifications. So that's going to be funny in the video. I'm going to leave it in. I'm not going to cut it. But as always, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. Really, really, really appreciate you. Thank you for choosing, out of all the things that you could do with your time, you chose to watch this. So it is genuinely appreciated. And until next time, may you walk on warm sands.